The name of my book is Language Visible. People ask me, why'd you call it that? Why don't you just call it Alphabet Soup? I might have. The point of Language Visible, as I describe in the book, is that the alphabet was an invention for the showing of language. It was a superior way for showing as image the sounds of language. It was invented for a specific language in the Bronze Age 4,000 years ago. And its secret power, obviously unknown to its inventors, was that it could be used for many other tongues, different tongues from that for which it was invented. Today, of course, we use the Roman alphabet of 26 letters, which is a direct descendant of the earliest alphabet of 2000 BC, and we share the Roman alphabet with about 100 other languages on Earth. That's just our Roman alphabet. That's not counting Cyrillic, Greek, Arabic. So that's why I decided upon the title Language Visible, because the alphabet is language made visible. You can show language in other ways, but my contention is that the letters of the alphabet were the most effective way ever invented of showing language. The alphabet was an invention rather like the wheel. Like the wheel, it was invented once in the Bronze Age, and it is still with us today and has never been superseded for the purpose for which it was invented. I'd like to read briefly from one chapter of the book. The book consists, although not exclusively, the book includes 26 chapters, each chapter devoted to a single letter of the alphabet. Obviously, these chapters are based partly on my Ottawa Citizen series of 4 years ago. But I like to think they've been amplified by adamant research and rewriting. The chapter I'd like to read from regards the letter X, which really is one of the more interesting letters of the alphabet. Not that I'm supposed to play favorites. So this is from my chapter on letter X. Xenophobia means fear of foreigners, and no word better displays the alien and forbidding spirit that once belonged to X. True, the letter has mellowed in the past 12 years or so. But in olden days, before there were X-Files, X-Games, or the Xbox, the X was an outsider, slightly sinister, sparingly used. 30 years ago, X stood mainly for a movie off limits to kids, or for the poison warning on a product label. If X marked the spot on a treasure map, you could bet it was someplace remote and dangerous. Remote, if fabulous, was Xanadu, capital of Kubla Khan in Samuel Coleridge's poem of 1798. The X-Men of 1960s Marvel comic books were mutant superheroes. Good guys, but, well, mutants. Even the gas called xenon, which is abbreviated Xe on the elemental chart, was never exactly the substance next door. Indeed, the name xenon means foreign thing. It carries the same Greek root as in xenophobia. Some of X's mystery comes from its low rate of use. In printed English, it ranks second or third to last, above Z, and in some surveys above Q or J. As an initial letter, X ranks dead last. It's the one that appears least at the start of English words. Yet more important to X's mystique is its traditional job denoting an unknown or unrevealed mathematical quantity. Question: if 3x equals x plus 3, what is x? Does anyone know the answer? Oh, come on. I knew you were illiterate, but I didn't think you were completely innumerable. I'm sorry. It was a trick question. The answer is, sir. Was that you? Okay. The answer is 1.5. This use of x was introduced in 1637 by none less than French philosopher, mathematician, scientist René Descartes in his treatise La Géométrie. Descartes assigned letters x, y, and z to symbolize any three unknowns in a geometric equation. but he favored X. The association stuck. Down later centuries of math and science, X came to be used almost the same as a question mark. In 1895, when German physicist Wilhelm Conrad Röntgen discovered a strange new radiation, he called it the X-ray because he didn't know what it contained. A similar scientific fog enshrouds such 1950s and 60s science fiction movie duds as The X from Outer Space, Strange World of Planet X, and X, the Unknown. In fiction and even journalism well into the 20th century, the letter X might be published in place of someone's name to preserve anonymity and guard against libel lawsuits, a custom reflected in the title of a silly 1938 Laurence Olivier and Merle Oberon movie called The Divorce of Lady X. Similarly, in 1952, American black liberation advocate Malcolm Little, to commemorate his forgotten African lineage, changed his name to Malcolm X. And who above age 40 could forget the disesteemed Brand X? Brand X was the name used in certain 1960s TV commercials to cloak the identity of the competitor's product being shown on screen as inferior to Less Toil floor cleaner or Brillo scouring pads. In 1968, the Motion Picture Association of America introduced lettered ratings to alert moviegoers to levels of sex, profanity, or violence in new releases. At the adult content end of the spectrum, R stood for restricted, and X stood for extreme, the category including pornography. Practically overnight, X took on a new association in the North American mind: dirty, explicit sex. Thus, by the end of the 1960s, X could mean either mystery, or danger, or sex, a memorable combination. X was the unknown, the sinister, the extreme. Subsequent decades have seen the letter's public relations improve dramatically. But first, some ancient history. Most of our modern letters descend from the Phoenician alphabet of 1000 BC. However, X comes to us from a later stage of the alphabet, namely the Greek alphabet of about 800 BC. The Greeks had a letter called xi, which captured the distinctive sound x in Greek. This letter xi had more than one shape depending on different variants of the Greek alphabet. But one possible shape looked just like our letter X, and this X-shaped Greek xi would become the grandfather of our X. In about 700 BC, the Greek alphabet was copied by the Etruscans of Italy to represent the sounds of their language. And in about 600 BC, the Etruscan alphabet was copied by the Romans to represent their language, Latin. Roman X denoted the x sound in Latin words like rex, meaning king, or exit, meaning he goes out. The name of the letter was formed by simply prefixing a vowel to the sound, X. After the fall of Rome in about AD 500, X and other Roman letters passed eventually to the Roman alphabets of medieval European languages, including English. X became an English letter. It denoted a sound, x, that occurred at the middle or end of Old English words, but not at the beginning. Today, the Anglo-Saxon sound is retained in old words like Saxon, ox, and mix, while words delivered through medieval Norman French may have a softer X, as in luxury or anxious. At the start of a word, X takes yet a softer sound, z, as in xylophone. Most modern English words starting with X derive from ancient Greek. Xylophone means wooden voice. Xanthine means yellow. Xiphoid means sword-shaped. The name Xena, warrior princess of comic books and TV, means foreign lady in Greek. The name Xerox takes off from the Greek adjective xeros, meaning dry, as in the English word xerography, a dry copying method perfected in the late 1950s to improve on mimeographing. Since the early 1990s, X has come roaring into the mainstream to the extent that it is now one of the defining letters of the new millennium. Like capital Q or a little e or a little I, the X has been drafted for marketing and advertising. It now signifies something like computer magic and control or cutting edge. Witness such software company names as X Collaboration, X Point Technologies, and X Vision Eclipse, not to mention Germany's X Film production company, which produced Run Lola Run. Microsoft's Xbox video game console actually carries an X across its top. The X is a plastic repoussé shape that seems to hold it all in there. In its look and name, the Xbox promises fun and control across the board for the whole family. Brand names like these, which in part exploit X's rarity in normal English, would have looked really odd 30 or 35 years ago. In 1972, when the X-rated film Deep Throat was out, a product name like Xbox would have seemed laughably obscene. Today, corporate choice of trademark X belongs to a new climate in which the letter has been rehabilitated. How so? One groundbreaking change in this direction was the 1991 fiction bestseller Generation X, Tales for an Accelerated Culture by Douglas Copeland. Published during a recession, the book addressed the diminished expectations of North American post-baby boomers, born between about 1965 and 1975. Its title played on the brand X of the 1960s TV commercials concurrent with the birth of these people. The term Generation X caught on immediately, and soon the media were referring to 20-somethings in the early 1990s as Xers. By the late 90s, we had Y-ers too. Computer jargon had changed also by the early 1990s. The development of the X window system for graphics display in 1986 was followed by the popular Quark Express software program in 1987 and the arrival of mature desktop publishing. Soon, capital X began to imply page layout software in brand names. Today we have capital X per Tools, Punch XT, Xstream, and HexWeb XT, which are all software extensions of basic Quark programs. In addition, there's the whole Windows X server software category. Then came the X-Files. Debuting in 1993 and titled for the traditional X of mystery, this Fox TV hit series, about two good-looking FBI agents pursuing evidence of an alien planet conspiracy to take over the world, helped to normalize X and give it associations of thrills and pleasure for millions of the show's fans. By the time the series folded in 2002, X had reached legitimacy. It wasn't just for sex and danger anymore. The custom of writing X's for kisses in signing off a letter dates from the Middle Ages, when much of Europe's population remained illiterate. On legal documents, in lieu of a signature, a person might write an X or the sign of the cross. The signatory would then kiss the X to promise to stick to the agreement. Over later centuries, the written X came to mean not the signature, but the kiss. And ladies and gentlemen, that's my excerpt from chapter X. While I'm standing here, of course, I'm very happy to take questions if there are any. I've written one previous book, published in 1995. It's an A to Z reference book about the ancient Greeks, written for basically public libraries and high school libraries. And in the course of that, in one tiny corner of that, I was researching the origins of the Greek alphabet, and I stumbled on certain facts relevant to all alphabetic writing and the origin of alphabetic writing that I found absolutely astonishing. And the fact is this, that when the Greeks invented or created their alphabet, basically what they did was to take the existing alphabet of the Phoenicians and use those letters for the writing of Greek. Now, that's a little bit as though a bunch of ignorant, illiterate Anglo-Saxons in the year 600 AD had picked up the Arabic alphabet and started using it for writing Old English. In other words, the letters of the Phoenician alphabet were used for the showing of Phoenician, which was an ancient Semitic language closely akin to Hebrew. And this was a language entirely different from Greek, which is a member of the Indo-European language family and is distantly related to English, German, ancient Latin, and other Indo-European languages. And I suddenly began to realize that this wasn't the only time in history that this had happened, that the alphabet subsequent to that was passed from one language to another across languages that were mutually unintelligible, but for which the alphabetic writing would work for each language. And I couldn't get over it. The languages were unintelligible to each other and had no shared source as languages. And yet these little symbols could work for one language to another. And our alphabet starts with ancient Semites whose latest expression is the ancient Phoenicians, but it was passed then to the ancient Greeks, as mentioned, from the Greeks to the Etruscans, from the Etruscans to the Romans, and from the ancient Romans it was passed to Romance languages and languages of Northern Europe in the early Middle Ages like English. And this is a long-winded answer, but I was so astonished by this power of alphabetic writing. I realized the alphabet was almost like a mechanical tool, like the wheel or a pulley or the stirrup, and it could work for whoever possessed it. And I found this so counterintuitive that I decided then the alphabet would be a good subject for a book. Of our 26 letters, about 19 go back to the ancient Near East, back to the Phoenicians and earlier. And these 19 letters, at least, began their lives as pictures. If you draw a capital A and turn the piece of paper upside down and look at it, it looks a little like the head of a cow looking at you with the horn sticking up in the air and the narrow chin. Well, guess what? The letter A began its life as the picture of the head of a cow. Our letter O looks a little, you could say it looks a little like an eyeball, someone's eyeball or a mouth, but it began its life as the picture of a human eyeball. The letter M, capital M, has these wavy lines. Well, can anyone guess what the original picture was? Water, exactly. And the point of this is that in each case, the picture was the picture of a familiar household object. And the object in the ancient Phoenician language commanded a name. The name of water was Mem. The name of a hand was Kaf. And the letter denoting the M sound was water because the letter was a picture of water, and the word water had the correct opening sound. The letter K began its life as the image of a human hand, a sort of stickman's hand. And this letter was called Kaf, which in the ancient Semitic tongue meant hand. And the connection was that the word hand began with the sound K, Kaf, and the letter denoted the sound K. The letter didn't denote the word hand, it denoted the sound K. One point that I try to make in the book, and that fascinated me, was that some of these shapes have survived 4,000 years and are still with us, hiding in plain sight on a printed page. The oldest forms of our letters are the capitals. 23 of our capital letters go back to the alphabet of the ancient Romans, of the Roman Empire. The lowercase forms reflect subsequent developments that occurred in European ink handwriting between about, I don't know, I guess about 300 AD, finishing up in 1500 AD. In that vast period, the lowercase shapes gradually emerged one by one in different ink styles of the Middle Ages. So that the letter N for the ancient Romans had just one form, the N, 3 strokes. And in handwriting following the fall of Rome, it continued to have only one form, 3 strokes. And then in around 800 AD, under the Frankish king Charlemagne, there was a reform of handwriting to try to make it more legible. And that's where suddenly we see the emergence of this differently styled N, which is really like a docked lowercase h, you know, 1 stroke down and a curve. And the point was that this was quicker to write, and in theory more legible, although you could dispute that. What happened then was, with the birth of printing, printers deliberately copied these medieval ink forms in punching out the lower, and in designing and punching out lowercase letters in print. Every alphabet has different sounds, even Roman alphabets, like in Polish or Czech or Turkish. Those are Roman alphabets, but they contain letters with sounds that we don't have. And those, we call them, those letters different from ours are tailored to sounds of the Turkish or Polish language. All the onus is not on our own 26 letters, that these things are tailored for use by different languages. And the next thing to say is that, you know, in some ways, our 26 letters for English are woefully inadequate. We have to double and triple up sounds in our spelling. I mean, there's always been this tension between keeping the numbers of letters down low enough so that children can learn them versus phonetically perfect spellings. I understand Finnish has 21 letters and is phonetically perfect. English, with its vast, its complicated, its mixed origins in vocabulary, I think it would take 50 letters for us to adequately represent the sounds of English. Our sequence goes back to the ancient Romans, and the ancient Roman sequence mirrors somewhat the sequence of the Etruscans, going back to the ancient Greeks. Our alphabet is inherited in its sequence. We've inherited rather a bit of the Phoenician alphabet, about 50%, and the other 50% has been subsequent fiddlings through this process of it being handed down from people to people. The real question is, why the original sequence? And I phoned up an epigraphist, someone who studies ancient writing at Princeton Theological Seminary, and I said, do we know why Aleph came first in the alphabet? And this guy studied this all his life, and he said, we haven't a clue. He said, no, there's nothing that can explain the absolute sequence, except that certain letters that sounded similar were placed next to each other for memorization, obviously. The M and the N letter, which in our alphabet are exactly in the middle, they came fairly near the middle of the Phoenician alphabet, and clearly they were put next to each other because they suggested each other, and that was a memory device. The modern Greek and the modern Hebrew alphabets reflect the ancient Phoenician in that the second letter is a B sound, the third letter is a G sound, and the fourth letter is a D sound. So it's B, G, D. And these three sounds belong together because they are all voiced stops. They're the only three voiced stops in the alphabet. And clearly the Phoenicians and their forerunners put these three together because they suggested each other. So we have partial explanations like that. But as for deciphering the sequence, I don't think it's knowable. Okay, thank you very much indeed.